It's about conversations between poets. Many years ago, I thought that poets were one of the most, it seemed to be one of the most non-glamorous things to be a poet. It felt like novelists always had their place in the sun, they were always guzzling publicity, and they also got royalty checks that we never got. So it felt like being a poet was not lucrative, not glamorous, and there was even an American market research survey that claimed that poets died sooner than any other species of writer. So there's really no reason to be doing it. So the question is, why do we do it? And why do we continue years later on this journey of trying to draw people to a session, trying to get them to sit, trying to convince them that poetry is worth listening to? Why do it? Which is what made me write a poem many years ago called, which is not in this book. I wrote it in my second book of poems, which was published in 2005. It's called To a Poem Still Unborn. Over tea, we wonder why we write poetry. 10 people read it anyway. 3 are committed in advance to disliking it. 3 feel a vague pang, but have leaking taps and traffic jams to think about. 2 like it and wouldn't mind telling you so, but don't know how. Another is busy preparing questions about pat ironies and identity politics. The 10th is wondering whether you wear contact lenses. And we, as soiled as anyone else, in a world addicted to carbohydrates and conversations without pauses, still groping among sunsets and line lengths and slivers of hope for a moment unstained by the wild contagion of habit. So it's really that endless pushing against the contagion of habit and keeping the faith somewhere that people want to be enchanted by this ancient form of verbal sorcery that is poetry. I think that's what keeps one going. So on that note, I'm going to ask my interlocutors, Sangha and Preeti, to take over.
Okay, I'm supposed to be doing the interview and all of that, but I just want to say first, like, this is such a great honor for me because, like, she's been one of the greatest influences of for me in my writing as well. I remember reading the poem to the Welsh critic who doesn't find me identifiably Indian. I mean, like, being from the Northeast as well, we have to prove not to just foreigners, but to our own Indian people as well that we are actually Indians as well. Yeah, and she had one interesting line that really, really always stuck with me. She said, "Reading my Keats, or is it yours?" And I found that line so subtle, but yet so profound at the same time to say, "Reading my Keats, or is it yours?" Because it presented such so many questions inside my head as to who poetry really belongs to. Like, does it really have to have a nationality or anything like that? That anyone can read it, and if you feel it. And also you write a lot about the fact that poetry is less about understanding it, but more about feeling it as well, which again, I agree to completely as well. So I really, really have loved your work. Also the fact that in a poem like Tongue, for example, you mentioned cockbrock. I'm not sure too many people know about cockbrock even. So it's like, I love that. And yeah, so we have all of that. So again, I just wanted to know, though, at least for our audience here, and also for me, like I'll just like to go back to the beginning and tell us why poetry. How did you fall in love with poetry, and specifically why English poetry?
Despite the Welsh critics.
Yeah, despite the Welsh critics. I know because even I get asked this question a lot, and it's very, I don't know, it's a very subversive, but a sort of I don't know how to put this, but I've been told, like, I've been told, you have a beautiful language of your own, why do you write in your colonizer's language? And I understand the intent behind the question, that it's not good at all. So I remember once being asked that in Delhi, and so I replied to the person that asked the question in Mizoram. And he said, "I don't understand," and I said, "Exactly." So things like that. So it's like very, very it's so these spaces that these questions that we kept getting asked. So I just want to know how you started it, how it came to be, and how you dealt with these questions, which I'm sure you have had a lot of as well.
That's a lovely question. Thank you, Sangha, and thank you for reminding me of The Welsh Critic, which is a very old poem, and which was written, I think, as far back as 2004, soon after the publication of my first book. Let me see if I can actually read that poem to you. If I remember it, I will. But to answer this question about why poetry, perhaps for the very same reasons as for you, which is there was the earliest excitement that I remember was around patterned language, language that seemed to be unpredictable, language that seemed to be dangerous, language that seemed startling. And to me, that was what poetry was about. It was a combination of word and pause, word and pause. That's what rhythm is. I think as a child, that excited me hugely. And much later in my adolescence, I saw it much more as self-expression. But now, in my relative dotage, I'm going back to seeing poetry much more as a kind of listening. And it is, to me, one of the most exciting kinds of listening that I know. When it actually works, I call it a kind of inspired eavesdropping on the self. And I enjoy that. That's primarily why poetry. But why I continue to write in English is simply this, Sangha. This is perhaps similar to what you were saying. I'm not sure I would be capable of writing a poem in Tamil. I grew up in Mumbai, which is a multilingual city. It's a city where I learned Hindi well before I learned Tamil. And as a result, my life is this happy polyglottal mess of some Hindi, some Marathi, some Gujarati, and of course a lot of English, and Tamil. But the only language of literary competence that I know is English. And it took me time to realize that I need not be apologetic about that, because I realized that English is as much an Indian language as any other, if one makes it one's own. That it could be as Indian as cricket, as Indian as democracy. It's ours. It's how we make it ours, how we inhabit it really that counts, which is really what I was saying in that rant poem to the Welsh Critic. You know, I haven't read that poem in a long while, but let me see if I can recall it. It's one long rage poem addressed to a Welsh critic, but I always say that it could just as well have been addressed to one of the voices right here in our country, telling us how to belong to a particular community, or how to belong to a particular moment in time. How to be modern, how to be traditional, how to be postmodern, whatever. Or how to belong to a particular faith or gender. To the Welsh critic who doesn't find me identifiably Indian. You believe you know me, wide-eyed Ing-lit type, from a sun-scalded colony, reading my Keats, or is it yours? While my country detonates on your television screen. You imagine you've cracked my deepest fantasy. Oh, to be in an Edwardian vicarage, living out my dharma with every sip of dandelion tea and dreams of the weekend jumble sale. You may have a point. I know nothing about silly mid-offs. I stammer through my Tamil, and I long for a nirvana that is hermetic, odor-free, bottled in Switzerland, money back guaranteed. This business about language, how much of it is mine, how much yours, how much from the mind, how much from the gut, how much is too little, how much too much, how much from the salon, how much from the slum, how I say verisimilitude, how I say brahadaranyaka, how I say varaparam, it's all yours to measure. The pathology of my breath, the halitosis of gender, my homogenized plosives about as rustic as a mouth-freshened global village. Arbiter of identity, remake me as you will. Write me a new alphabet of danger, a new patois to match the chola bronze of my skin. Teach me how to come of age in a literature you've bark scratched into scripture. Smear my consonants with cow dung and turmeric and godhuli. Pity me, sweating, rancid, on the other side of the counter. Stamp my papers, lease me a new anxiety, grant me a visa to the country of my birth. Teach me how to belong the way you do on every page of world history.
Whoa!
Thank you, and good to be reminded of old rages that never quite die.
To add to that, the whole idea of, using English and, as a tool and all of that, you get questioned about it too as well. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, not about English, but basically about this new book. Because, I don't know, for me, it's always been women and women's writing that attracts me. Women's fiction, women's memoirs, women's poetry, and the fact that you've gone actually to women mystics, because they seem to stand out as this beacon of hope, that you can leave patriarchy, domestic bliss, whatever your domesticity, I mean all of that, things that you've been made to believe are where you need to be. I mean, in that earlier session when Jerry was talking to Shobha and we talked of the perfect body and how you're creating this body for this person that you're going to marry or be with, all of that. And then you have these women, these upside down women, this gallery that you've got here, who've decided that this is not for them, this physical, corporal self, this, this binding is to be broken, and they do it in the most miraculous, wondrous ways, where you've got them in your poems where they're walking on their hands with their legs flailing against the wind. You have them naked to take in every single thing that can come to them, whether it's from nature or from men. And I find that extremely liberating as a person, but also as a woman, especially. And so I'm really interested in, you've written in your author's note that you came to this fascination and this passion and reading about these women and putting them down in your last two books. But take us also on that journey, because this to me is something fantastic, and this, I think, is what we all women drink chai together and strive for. So, yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful question. And I think it leads very organically from what Shobha and Jerry were talking about, body. It struck me, Preeti, I'm an omnivorous reader of all kinds of sacred poetry, and I've been rescued by many of the mystics down the ages and across spiritual traditions by their poetry, time and again. But a question that began gathering momentum for me in the past decade is, where are the women? And I realized that in this particular subcontinent, all of us, when we think of sacred poetry, we think of Mirabai. In the south, many of us think of Andal. But most of us don't know of many women beyond that. Some of us know of Akka Mahadevi in Karnataka, but not very many women beyond that. And even these women, it seemed to me, had been flattened into anemic, asexual women. Women without sensuality, women without bodies, women without hormones, women without hungers and bewilderments. So if you actually read Mirabai and you go back to the poetry, you realize that there is the smell of danger in these poems. So the very same Mirabai whom all of us just think of as swooning at the feet of Krishna is the very same Mirabai who in one of her poems tells this little bird, I'll tear off your wings, I'll rub salt in your beak if you don't bring my lover to me now. There's that kind of fierceness in the diction that I realized I had never been encouraged to hear. as a young person growing up. Akka Mahadevi, who is a woman mystic of the 12th century who walked naked, we are told. She is often presented to us as this kind of antiseptic saint, constantly singing the praises of Shiva, which she did do. And yet, what did it take to inhabit her body? What did it take to walk naked? What did it take to live in that state of radical vulnerability? That was another question that fascinated me. And the same Akka, if you read her poems, has a poem in which she says, take these husbands who die, decay, and feed them to your kitchen fires. Give me the imperishable one. Why had I never heard of this Akka Mahadev? Why had I never heard of Lal Ded, the Kashmiri woman mystic, translated by Ranjit Hoskote, who says in one of her poems, I pestled my heart in the mortar of love. I roasted it and ate it up. Why had I never heard of this kind of terrifying kitchen that some women inhabited? Why had I not heard of the 14th century Dalit woman mystic whom you've translated, Jerry, Soirabai, who says, if menstrual blood makes me impure, tell me who wasn't born of that blood? Why hadn't I heard of her? And why had I never heard of the wonderful Janabai? I knew of her, but I knew of her in these dulcet songs, this kind of Sugam Sangeet of a kind. You know, pretty songs, ornamental songs. I didn't know of the Janabai, a 13th century maid servant, who in one of her poems says this. If you want any proof of dangerous women, here they are. In one of her poems, she says, in a poem translated by Arun Kolatkar, she says, God, my darling, do me a favor and kill my mother-in-law. I will be lonely when she is gone, but you will be a good God, won't you? And kill my father-in-law. I will be glad when he is gone, but you will be a good God, won't you? And kill my sister-in-law. I will be free when she is gone. I'll pick up my begging bowl and be on my way, and then it's just the two of us, you and I. I believe there was a reason why we were never encouraged to tune in to the temerity of these voices. And the reason, no surprises for guessing what that reason is. It would have been far too inconvenient. So I was interested in this kind of voice, not necessarily though, the voice that eschews domesticity. There are some women in my book, Wild Women, which is an anthology of Indian women mystic poets. There are some of them who give up, walk out of their homes and walk the streets like Akka Mahadevi, naked or otherwise. They walk as mendicants. There are others who choose monkhood. There are others who choose to remain in the family and often are able to convert their very husbands into their spiritual partners. There's that kind of woman too. And there is the courtesan poet who fascinates me no end. Whether we're talking about Amrapali 2,500 years ago at the time of the Buddha, the courtesan who became a nun, and who has a magnificent poem in the Terigatha, looking down at her naked body and talking about the ravages of life and aging on her body. And at the same time, along with that heartbreak, there is pride. There is pride at what this body is capable of being. There's Piro, the 19th century Punjabi woman mystic, a woman who escaped from the brothel of Lahore. We were talking about her just last night. She escaped from a brothel in Lahore, found her mentor, a very charismatic Sikh mentor. So you have the coming together of this Muslim courtesan and this Sikh mentor. There is a romantic partnership, a spiritual partnership. There is no attempt to wish away the body or to deny the body. There's an acknowledgement of that, but there is also an acknowledgement of something more, an appetite for something more. So the prostitute poets, the sex worker poets, the courtesan poets, they fascinate me too. They're all part of this great mix. So I have some of them in my book too. There's all kinds of upside downness, Preeti, which fascinated me. And in fact, the Upside Down Women, the title, comes from a woman whom almost no one knows of outside of the South. A woman whom we are told chose to walk upside down all the way from her little village in Tamil Nadu to Mount Kailash to meet her Shiva. And we are told this was a beautiful woman who chose this hideous demonic form. And I just marveled at all these choices that we don't hear of. Women who either voluntarily choose old age, who voluntarily choose a very different aesthetic and choose to live by that. Women who made all kinds of life choices. They're all part of this crazy book.
Choices that you're talking about. Like, I go back to your old poem and the new collection that you have. The old poem, like How to Read an Indian Myth, I think something like that. Like, I think you can combine the two. And what you've said about, what is that thing, the word that you use? Contraband of radiance, spiritual contraband that you say. Where, you know, you talk about taking agency, but in your own, by your own set of rules. Not in any way that anyone wants us to do it, but by our own set of rules. So all that you're talking about just now is talking about that choice, isn't it? So it's like, can you read some of the poems that you feel represents that?
Okay. I think I'm so glad you mentioned choice, Sangha, because I think that's what Shobha talked of earlier. That these are not, when she was talking of women who work with a sense of agency, not women who see themselves as victims or just pawns. To me, that excites me. So I'm going to read you a poem by this woman, again, unknown largely in India, in most parts of India. She's a Kannada woman poet of the 12th century, not celebrated in the way that Akka Mahadevi is. Her name is Sule Sankava. And she interests me because she's a woman who wrote ecstatic poems to Shiva, we are told. But she also happens to be a prostitute. And in her poetry, she says, the men around me are unsurprising. I have a transactional relationship with them. I give them what they want, they give me what I need. It's a very clear transaction. She's not apologizing about that at all. But she says, my God, she says, is different. And her definition of her God is Nirlajeshwara, the shameless God. And this idea of a courtesan poet, a prostitute poet telling us about a shameless God whom she doesn't have to purify herself to reach, but a God who gets his hands grimy trying to reach her. To me, this is just breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. Why did I not grow up hearing of Sule Sankava among all these other women mystics? So I had to write a poem to her, but I also took the liberty of writing as her. This is Sule Sankava speaking. And in this poem, she mentions a whole lot of women mystics. You don't have to know their names. Some of the names you might know. I mention them because women deserve to be named. They have not been named. And naming is a way of remembering, it's a way of honoring, so I name them. But it's a playful poem by Sule Sankava called God's Forgotten Nickname. Who says harlots don't have choices? We can't choose our clients. And believe me, I've seen them all. Fried, boiled, scrambled, poached, sunny side up, runny side down. But we can choose our gods. I chose mine because he came without a name and on some nights without a body. I chose him because he waited his turn, didn't ask me to hurry or clean up, didn't complain about the line of shuffling men at my door. When colleagues badger me for details, I turn sassy. I say, Mahadevi's God unhoused her, Janas deloused her, Andas aroused her, Avayyars doused her. Some like them fried, others like them boiled, some like them immaculate. I like my gods soiled. But they aren't impressed. He must have a USB, they claim, a sun sign, an address, for God's sake, a name. I grow quiet. He has a garland of fancy titles, I say, but they don't quite work for me. Perhaps he is the world's greatest lover, but how does that matter when planets shrivel and char in the flaming cemetery of his gaze. And maybe he birthed the three worlds beneath the delirious hurricane of his feet. But how does that count if he's too bloody innocent to read the lurch and plummet of a contrarian heart, the fine print of my breaths? And yet, he is mine, friends, for a simple reason. For he rushes to my side when I utter his darkest, most intimate, most forgotten nickname, the one coveted by every god there is, my God without shame. Thank you. Thank you.
So again, to go back to these women, because in poem after poem, apart from the fact that, of course, the poems about the upside down women, but even in the other poems in earlier sections, you seem to now imply that the women no longer wait. I mean, they do not now want to be waiting for anybody to be giving them permission to be this, or to say this, or to actually exemplify, whether it's the mystics or this other way of life. And as you said, you can also do it in domesticity, which might be a little harder, but yeah, you get to it. And so the fact of the women not really waiting, and that the masks, so the women not really waiting anymore, and that the masks are off, and it's time to be faces again. So to me, all of it actually ties together with the fact of the women today, contemporary as well, where it is time to take your mask off and be a person, be a face, not to wait anymore. So it's also like beyond just talking about the mystics of yore, of long ago, there are also exhortations to contemporary women to come out of it.
I would say though, Preeti, I don't see those as women of yore anymore, though I mentioned, of course, the centuries to which they belong. If I just saw this as an act of homage to the dead and gone, I probably wouldn't have allowed myself to write a book of poems. I see them as my contemporaries. I see them as the sisterhood I wish I'd known of, an empowered, crazy, passionate, spirited, argumentative sisterhood that I wish I'd grown up knowing of.
Yeah, but you've also made them into our sisterhood, which is what I mean to say. So they're no longer just yours. You're also letting them be visible to all of us in all their glory, and to claim them, and to name them, and to actually belong to that tribe, should you wish to. So, and what I said about domesticity earlier, because you say in that girl from Karaikal, I mean, she did the right things at first. She made the rasam, and she did, plaited her hair and put the flowers in, and she waited for her husband to come, and the husband says all these really wonderful things about his new wife. And then when she decides to not, because in the later part of the poem where she is stirring tsunamis into that very rasam, is when he decides to get a new wife. So this whole contradiction of women won't...
And he doesn't just get himself a new wife, he touches her feet, he anoints her a goddess, and then he gets himself a new wife. Don't forget that. So she is deified, and then comes the new wife.
So all of this, I mean, you've already said part of it, but this kind of, it's almost like I said, it's an extortion, sort of telling us to get up and find this deeper self, and find this mystic self within you.
I think, because we started this, and I'm just trying to tie the threads of our conversation together, because we started early talking about the Welsh critic, and I started talking about rage, and trying to tie that in with what you just mentioned, I believe it has taken me a long time to realize that a rage poem, and I stand by the Welsh critic poem, and I enjoy reading it. Thanks for bringing it up. But I believe what interests me more now is less gnashing my teeth about all the people and all the circumstances that I find problematic. What interests me more now is affirming and celebrating and singing anthems about what I want to affirm. You know, choosing to talk about that rather than all that I would rather not look at or talk about, which is not to believe it doesn't exist. It exists, but I'm not going to choose to eulogize it in any way in my poetry. I don't want to immortalize a Welsh critic anymore, in whatever small way poetry immortalizes people. So it's really about talking about what I would like to celebrate. So I believe that in some way the rage poem has been replaced by the anthem. The anthem can have the same energy as a rage poem, but it can be celebratory, exultant, unapologetic. That excites me more. Maybe I should read one poem. Can you find me the page? If someone can, I will read you a fun poem. Okay, I might have found the page. This is about two contemporary women, but it could just as well be about men. You know, men are included too. As long as you enjoy chai, this poem is for you. How many of you enjoy chai? Where's Guru? Guru's not here. Guru's away. So this is not for Guru, who has been encouraging us all to switch to coffee. When two women drink chai together. All's well in the world when two women drink chai together. Time holds its breath, star anise glitters, ginger gives up the ghost, lemongrass grows rogue, cinnamon is less sinned against than sinning. Bodhidharma awakens when two women drink chai together. Aeolian harps trill, kettle drums roll, mind meets heart, part becomes whole. Apothecaries smile, and sommeliers sing. Lao Tzu intones the Tao Te Ching. Nilgiri meets Darjeeling when two women drink chai together. Froth of jade, jewel dew, ancient cauldron, friendship brew. One's a hermit, ten's a jamboree. The perfect number is always 3. A cackling duo and a pot of tea. Two women drinking chai together. There will be time to love our men, but not when caffeine meets estrogen. The defense budget and the state of AI must stand aside as earth meets sky. Ours is not to question why teaspoons tango and hippos fly when two women drink chai together. There will be a time when both God and beast are included in our cosmic feast. And one day it won't be out of line to quaff a martini or a bottle of wine. But right now, friend, it's been too long. Ooh long, ooh long, ooh bloody long, since two women drank chai together.
Lovely.
Is pe, I think lunch ho jaye, unless there's anyone who wants to.
Chai pe charcha.
Obviously, but before that, fun question first. I know fun. Okay, is it still best to meet in poems?
It's a very good question. I think, did anyone hear him?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I'm going to answer the question. Is it still best? Like, I think about how the forcefulness that she writes with and how it's beautiful and strong and held high. And I sometimes wonder about the conversations or maybe is there any pushback with all of that? And more importantly, yes, it is still best to meet only in poems.
That's a line from a Eunice D'Souza poem. It's best to meet in poems, which I smuggled into my poem. Yes. So sometimes it's easier to just meet in poems, isn't it? At the same time, the reason we do readings and sessions like these at LitFest is in the hope of reminding people that somewhere between that whole barrage of selfies, between all the text messages that are ambushing you at this very moment, somewhere in the middle of all that, maybe poetry, the sound of poetry, can percolate somewhere into your life and remind you of a childhood excitement about language that dances, kinetic language. That's what poetry is. So that's the reason for doing the live reading. Otherwise, we'd all be at home reading poems, the few of us who read them, and the rest of us would be going on being all the things that we do, with, busy being concerned about traffic jams and leaking taps and all the things that are of pressing importance.
I think now we should engage the audience. And yes, if anyone has any questions or remarks to impart, Jerry, of course, always. We expect you to at least have a few words.
Poor Jerry, we should not put this.
I'd like you to trace the reluctance to engage with the mystic in the first book, say, to this unapologetic, unashamed Sika Arundhati, who's also poet Arundhati. Is there little you could tell us about that journey?
You've certainly been with me through half of it, at least, so you know what it's been about. I think much of it earlier, as you know, was about being a bit of a closet seeker and, parallelly living out a life of as a curator and journalist, or what are the things we did, poets in Poetry Circle, writers of various species. And one thought that would be enough, and I thought writing and the arts would save me, if at all I needed excitement and a heightened experience of life itself, a more profound experience of life itself. I thought it would come from the arts and that would be adequate. And when it didn't, and when I was plunged into places that seemed wordless and scary, and you were very much around at that time too, I think another kind of journey gained intensity. And then, as I said in one of my poems, which I haven't read today, but there's a line from a poem in which I say, I opened the coffee percolator and found the roof flying off. So when the roof flew off in some way was when I think I realized I couldn't live in a closet anymore, and that I had to accept that I was, yes, a lover of language, which draws me to poetry, but I'm also a respectful lover, respectful and cautious lover of silences, which draws me to meditation.
I just wanted to add that I took that line of yours and I put it into a translation of Bahinabai, where I said, you open the jar and the roof flies off, and it was my hat tip to that poem of yours. Just a bit, something I'd like to
I'm
add.
glad you mentioned that, because in fact, it comes full circle, because I used your translation of Bahinabai in Wild Women, my anthology. You don't have to ask questions. The thing about poetry is it's fine to listen and just go away with the sound of poem.
Hey, once more, one more poem.
I want to ask
Oh, sorry.
before Jerry gets too rowdy. I just want to say I was so deeply moved by your poetry and getting to know you through your poems. Reconnect in a more passionate way with what you represent. So thank you so much. The question is, the mystic women that you spoke about and their descriptions, apart from being wild, are also, to me, explicit and sexual in context. Is it sublimation? Does it have to be Krishna and Shiva because they can't express it in their own lives to maybe the person they desire? Is it mainly sublimation or is it something else?
That's a wonderful question, Shobha, and it's one that recurs. I think it's been tempting very often to see these women as almost unfulfilled. And in many ways, even if one looks at literary critiques of modern women's poetry, a lot of modern literary criticism on women's poetry, not men, The men, even if they're talking about the I and the me, are actually implicating, we are told, the battle that's going on in Bosnia. But when women use the I and the me, they're talking about their unfulfilled personal lives. So this is sometimes an unfortunate assumption that we make when talking about women's writing generally. But when it comes to women in sacred poetry in particular, I think what I believe we perhaps don't give them enough credit for. Yes, it's possible. Yes, it's possible that they are writing on the one hand about lives that are just incomplete, that feel fractured, broken, not adequately integrated. It's possible. But why is it that when the men talk of the same thing, we think that they're talking about the sacred? When it's women, they're talking about sexual desire. Very often, that becomes the unfortunate fallout of ways of looking at women in sacred writing. I believe that these are women who, when they write, yes, there's an implicit critique of their social context, but I believe they're not just social reformer poets. Yes, there's an implicit critique of domesticity, but I don't believe they're only talking about their husbands. I believe that there is an acknowledgement of body with all its appetites, but there's also a hunger for something mysterious, nameless. There's a hunger for something more. There is no way to talk about that something more except through the language of the senses. All language falls back on the language of the senses, as you and Jerry were talking about earlier today. So the only way to speak of the sacred and the sublime is in fact through this very richly sensuous imagery. And if there's someone, I think the poets who remind us of that much better than the male poets ever do. There are some wonderful male poets, I'm not being disparaging, but some of the women mystic poets, the way in which they remind us that the sacred is not just transcendent, but immanent, right here in the pots and the pans of my life. You know, tangible. And, I can talk about my mother-in-law and God in the same breath as Janabai does. Or in another poem, she says, I eat God, I drink God, I sleep on God. I buy God, I count God, I deal with God. God is here, God is there. Void is not devoid of God. God is within, God is without. And what's more, there's God to spare. I love that. That surplus God. Everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Lunchtime?
Any more questions? Oh, there.
A very interesting session. By the way, your poem must have been translated into Tamil, or not?
My poem?
Yeah.
No.
I'm surprised.
No.
I
The book
wondered-
is just out, but I don't think it has been.
Any other regional language?
Some of my earlier poetry has been.
What is the response from the readers? Any idea? Whether you are the liberty that you take while writing your poems in English, whether it is acceptable to the Indian readership.
That's a good question, Damodar. I wish I had an answer to that. I know some of it has been translated into Hindi and into Tamil. These poems haven't. What I like to believe, this is what I'd like to believe, maybe it won't happen, maybe it's not true. But I think in much of the writing, I enjoy the irreverence of these voices, which I think comes through. But I also believe that I am not wishing away or chopping off aspects of them that I find inconvenient to me, as in, I believe that many of us inherited the Bhakti tradition mainly as countercultural voices, not quite acknowledging their thirst for the sacred. I like to believe that I acknowledge their thirst for the sacred, even as I acknowledge their humanness. I'd like to have both. And I hope that the poems in some way capture that. So I don't know how they will be translated if they are, but I hope that some of this spirit will be communicated, which is one of wonder, irreverence but wonder, respect and irreverence all at once, where there's critique but it's not contempt. You know, there is an ability to hold both. What I love about the Bhakti poet saints is that many of them are capable of loving their gods, denouncing their gods, but never ceasing to love them. They can even dismiss their gods, but they never cease to love them. That capacity to hold all of this together in a great cauldron of love, that to me is inspirational, even today.
I love that word, reverence, and I always associate it with so well with world poets in India. Whether it's Mona or you or Meena Kandasamy or English D'Souza, it's always so refreshing, the irreverence. And it's not just irreverence for the sake of irreverence, you know, it's like this, it dismantles, it makes you see things because of, they look at it differently. So it's like, I always love it. Is there any more questions?
One more poem.
Yeah, please, let's have more poems.
I think this is the right moment, Jerry. We are going to read tomorrow anyway. So I feel, is this the right moment to end? Nod. Yes. Yay or nay? Right moment to end. Let's have lunch and let's meet again tomorrow for more poetry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sangha.
Thank you
and
for
thank
such
you.
an energetic session, a package of lyrical ecstasy, I may say. Thank you, Arundhati. Thank you, Sangha. Thank you, Preeti, for the wonderful conversation on poetry.